Okay, so with that, Nick, let's talk about social media. Essentially, franchises, I started out my description of this, that franchises seem to have dropped off most people's horizon because there's not as much strident noise about them so much. And that's because in a social media environment, they really don't feature as much as they used to in the past. When in a pre-social media world, in every business convention, magazines, business papers always had a franchise story or a new franchise being born. So how has social media impacted the franchise scene?
Okay, well, that's a great question, and I think that social media has been a bit of an unwelcome friend as far as the franchise community is concerned. And the reason why it's been unwelcome, there are some good reasons and there are some bad reasons. I'll defend my franchisor colleagues in saying that a franchisor is responsible for the integrity of the brand, for the brand values, for the brand voice, for the client experience and perception of what they're going to receive. Now, every franchisor works very hard and diligently to build rhetoric that they can support, but they know that they can't keep everyone happy. Now, historically, what used to happen if someone was unhappy, then they might complain face to face, they might complain to their friends, they might complain over the dinner table or whatever the case may be, but those words just got lost. They got lost in time, and the reach and influence was quite small. Most of us perhaps have a reach and influence of 5 to 15 people that we would see on a regular basis. So our scope of influence was quite limited. But now, obviously, some of us have very significant influence. So if we have something to say about a franchise brand, if it's positive, it can be very good and impacting. If it's negative, that can be very detrimental to the rhetoric that a franchisor is trying to build. So there's an interest in social media, but there's also a fear of social media. But and I think that the thing that everyone is starting to realize, and what I've been talking about for years now as passionately as I can, is that you have to be involved in the conversation. Every one of us now is a publisher. I think most of us in business, most people who are 50 plus 40, 50, maybe 60 years old who have got to MD, CEO level, they are used to controlling being the publishers and operate.
Nick, it's the old broadcast model, isn't it, really? Because
Exactly.
that used to be what everybody was familiar with, and what a lot of people in a lot of businesses fall back onto the moment they're a little bit pressed.
Yes. Now this is
that world,
sorry.
I was going to say, within that world, a couple of questions on that. If you're a franchisee, how do you make sure that, for instance, you control the brand quality of what you broadcast or what you actually put out there?
This all boils down to leadership from the franchisor themselves. It's very difficult for a franchisee that may be enlightened in terms of the value of building conversation around their businesses and about the brand to want to be an activist. But as you said earlier on, there are contractual constraints on what they can and can't say, what they can and can't do. And there are a number of franchisors that still might be issuing their franchisees with bromides of what they can actually publish, which is obviously very very limited and very controlled. I think I think that they're very much they're almost extinct now, thankfully. But there's one or two holding on onto that level of control, but it's a losing battle. And one that all franchisors must realize, and that message is getting through.
It's a question of trust again, isn't it, in many ways, because the franchisor has to trust that he's doing sufficient amount of work to basically communicate the brand values or the brand image with his franchisees, and then perhaps empower them to project and amplify that. Is that happening?
I have a related comment that might help progress this conversation from
Mm-hmm.
Charles Perkins, and he says, with automatic contracts, Bitcoin, other advanced technology, what about cheap franchises that could support millions of contributors, creating a spectrum from community support and Kickstarter up to traditional franchising? So really what I think he's saying is it possible that we have a spectrum of franchising in the social media age? Will those traditional franchises still exist? Can they continue to exist as we develop these other types of franchises?
That's a good question, Nick, because essentially it talks about the disruptive power of social media when it impacts upon the traditional franchise model. So yes, that's an excellent question. So how would you answer that?
First of all, I want to give a bit of a general answer, and then I'll answer the question directly, if I may. First of all, I'd say that there is no old model and there is no new model. And what I mean by that is the brand and its values is owned by everyone that uses that brand and everyone that wishes to talk about that brand. And one thing that every business owner needs to understand is that they are not the sole custodians of that brand and that brand message. It's and this has been disruptive on every element. When it comes down to building franchise, when it comes down to selecting franchise, when it comes to operating franchise, it's actually all the same story. And this disrupts departmentalism. So the sales department and the marketing department and the admin department and the this and the that, they actually can't operate in isolation anymore. They have to operate as one unit because it's one story, and it's everyone that is active in the brand, from the franchisee to their clients, that really give the true value of what the brand is. Now, I think that in terms of sourcing crowd and building crowd, I think that is a fantastic way of thinking about franchising. I don't know any franchises that look at crowdsourcing in order to build trading, but I think it's a fascinating idea, and hey, I've been very interested in exploring that further.
That is awesome. And Nick, it's fascinating hearing you